Hi, I'm Dave Darlington, an engineer in New York City. Talking about my favorite gear, I primarily use analog on the record side. I'm pretty much a plug-in person. I rely on mostly waves, of course, and the stuff that comes with my DAW. Between the two of them, I hardly use anything else. My first discovery of waves was a mix I did on a very early Pro Tools. I remember there was Sound Tools, and it was hard to get your head around what Sound Tools was, a 2-track digital editor. And then suddenly I got called to a studio because I knew the artist and the producer. They were working at a jingle studio, which had an early adaptation of Pro Tools. And it was amazing. Everything was digital. And there was this one plugin called the Q series, which was the Q series EQ that we know. That's all there really was. But it was the best EQ I'd ever heard. And it was so accurate. You know, the notches. If you're used to turning a knob on an analog EQ, it cuts a pretty wide swath even when it's narrowed. But the Q, you could really zero in on a couple of notches of frequency and get them out, get the ring out of the tom-tom and get the boominess out of the bass. It was pretty amazing. And you could save your settings right there and they would come back the next day. That was pretty life-changing. I'm going to say that was 96 or 7, like very, very early in the Pro Tools world. The one thing I see about waves is the sound quality. I think that's one of the most important things that you can say about the company is their dedication to the quality of the sound. There are many plugins that alter the sound as soon as you instantiate it before you've done any sound altering, and I don't particularly want that. If I want that, I want a model, like some of the hardware modeling. Okay, we go to that because it has a certain quality of sound, a warmth, a glue, a shine. That's okay, and you use those in your palette, like a painter. But if you just want to do something to the sound without screwing it up first and do only what you want and nothing that you don't want, then I find that really true of the waves. The engineering type plugins like the R series, the Q series, it's going to be a long list of favorites with me actually, but the Q series for notch filtering and getting rings out of things that are not musical, you can't beat the Q series. If I'm doing a broader stroke, I would go to the R EQ or even the HEQ series, you know, for some color. For a quick down and dirty compressor, I love RVox. I don't only use it on Vox. RVox is kind of a one knob, more compression, less compression, and I use it on guitars, I use it on basses. But I do like the CLA models, classic compression models, especially the LA2As. And the fact that you have a setting called unity gain, no compression, so that's you can store a default. So when it comes up, it's not doing anything. And the amount of level that's going in is the level that's coming out. Now I know I've got to compress it, and now I start dialing it in and seeing what's happening without changing anything. So that's huge. As far as effects, I love the H delay because I love to filter it down, and it's, you know, time-based, very easy to work. Of course, the meta filter, meta flanger, mondo mod, those are my go-to. I call them swarblers. If you want a phase or flange, or I have this cool setting on Mondo Mod where it goes all the way around, but the mix is just a tiny bit, and I throw that on my pads. So my pads are going like this, just kind of hovering around in the background, but not sitting there like a lump. When you get a new Waves bundle, the presets are pretty well thought out, and they're really great starting points. CLA guitars, I'll go to the clean guitar, which has a nice tone, and it's got some delay and some verb, but it might not be appropriate for that song. So I might mute the delay and the verb and save that as Dave's clean guitar because I like the tone part of it. And then I can put the reverb or the delay or the chorusing up to taste, or I can use another delay or whatever I want. If you study what the preset's about and kind of look at the name, you know, like hard rock guitar, and then you see the compressor going like this, you go, oh, yeah, right, I get it. Hard rock guitars are really compressed, aren't they? So you can teach yourself a lot from the presets. There's a couple of problem solvers that I really can't live without, the X series and Z noise. For example, if you have a beautiful power guitar rock song and the tail is drifting off, bam, the last note, and the sound of the twin reverb is louder than the tail of the ride cymbal. So I wouldn't do the whole track, but I would isolate that last bit of noise, plug it into the Z noise, and just do that one bit. Problem solved. It's kind of fun to amaze people with that kind of stuff. It's like, wow, what happened to that word? I used the C series for the Deep Hopper preset. Some singers, they really think that they're being emotive when they pop their P's and slam their S's. So we've got a killer de-esser. I mean, I have analog de-essers down here, DBX 902s. There's 5 or 10 brands of de-esser. I've tried them all. And the basic Waves de-esser is the go-to. You just put the female or the male, it's gonna get you in the ballpark. You get the amount based on how they're performing, and then you fine tune that frequency, good to go. Most of the modeling I find by Waves is pretty amazing, and it's been going on for some time, so I'm an early adopter of some of those earlier ones. The Puig Tech and Puig Child, those are go-to things. On upright bass, those are killing on upright bass. So the difference is that if you have an old Pultec, it might have a cranky day, you know, and if you come in on a rainy day, it might not sound the same as it does on a dry day because the humidity affects it, and the connection and the burnishing of the patch bay. I know when I put a Puig Child onto something and I come back like a year from now, it's gonna sound exactly the same as I left it. I grew up on SSLs, and I've owned a couple. All the SSL models are really pretty accurate. Since I owned an E series and a G series, I spent a lot of hours with those EQs and what they're good at, what they're not so good at. You know, the sweetening of the highs on the voice and that kind of stuff on the EQ modules. But the ballistics of the bus compressor are very specific, and they're very much a sound of the pop music of the 90s and 2000s. So I put it on my master bus pretty early in the process, and I find when I engage the analog button that the ballistics of it, the way it reacts to the mix and glues it together is pretty much how I would expect a hardware version to sound. As far as other modeling plugins, some of the newer ones are pretty impressive too. I love the Shep 73s because of the EQ points. And the Abbey Road things are great. I was actually working on a Beatles cover project when the Red Desk came out, and some of those guitar sounds and drum sounds are pretty hard to come by. And we were, you know, reading the books and putting the mics to the, how did they do it? What's going on? And certain things we couldn't quite get. And then I got the Red Desk. Suddenly the guys in the band were going, that's it. That's what we've been looking for. And it was really just kind of running it through with a little bit of drive and some of those high-low EQ things, or filtering them out actually and getting that mid-range Beatles sound was super impressive. I record back into my DAW to Pro Tools, so I'm bussing out and bussing in. I'm not leaving the box. And then I will start with the SSL compressor just to hold my level together. I don't do a lot. I then do an S1. I love the S1 as just a width thing, because if you go to a mastering house, that's one of the first things they're gonna do is a mid-side. Hey, doesn't it sound wider now that you've come to me? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna do it with the S1. And then I've been through the L series since they started. The L1 was the revelation. Wow, my mix sounds powerful. L2 was warmer. L3 had more colors. I'm in love now with the L316. I just think it's the most ingenious usage of multiband limiting, and I often use it to shape. Instead of EQing my master bus, if I got to get a little tubbiness out or a little shine, I'll use the priority functions in the L series, which the L series works on the energy of the whole spectrum. So whatever's getting the most energy at that threshold is going to be held. But if you can prioritize, if it's taking out too much of your bottom, you can prioritize the bottom a little bit. Now it lightens up and throws its energy elsewhere in relationship to the way you have it set. So it's a very fine-tuning final sculptor. It's dynamic, so if you EQ out a certain frequency, it's going to EQ it out for the whole record. That frequency is gone. With a dynamic, especially a multi-band dynamic, you only EQ out that frequency when it's problematic. The rest of the time, that body will be there, or that top will be there, or that mid will be there. When it becomes problematic, your friend L316 is just keeping everybody in check. So I've got a couple of stored presets for different genres that I just kind of like the way they sound. The different signature series each have various uses for me. I like them all. I know a lot of those guys, and they're all pretty brilliant guys and sonically very creative. And they each took a little bit different approach into how they're going to create their bundle and what's going to make it different for each. And I think they've also included their signature sound. Somehow when I have a CLA guitar and I feel like it's getting that Lord Alge vibe, and high-end engineers won't just put one effect. This is kind of one thing that separates demo mixes and home mixes from professional mixes. Some of the artist series plugins have that. They have the basic effect that you're trying to get, and then they have the post effects. And I don't think people really are hip to how to use those to create subtlety in your mix that's going to set it up another 10% above those demo mixes. I use the Kramer tape a lot. I grew up on the records that he made, and you know, the Kramer tape sometimes on the mix bus before anything, because you can't hit it hard, it's tape. But before you start pumping it up, go through some tape and glue it together. So I use the Kramer tape a lot. As I said, I use the CLA guitars. Sometimes a quickie on the backgrounds, I'll use the CLA vocals, or the Maserati vocals also. They both have a certain pop shine to the high end that's very pleasant. As I was saying before, I like the Manny stuff because of the chain. You know, you can put some after effects on your main effect. I think that's a brilliant move. And I think also his EQ is beautiful because when you're an engineer in an analog studio, you have a resource management issue. You may have one Fairchild, two Pultecs, three DBX, and you have to decide what they're going to go for. So you have to say, well, the API EQ will be for this, and the Pultec EQ will be for that. And what he's done in his EQ is he's taken his 2 or 3 faves for that band. Okay, for lows, I like this and that. And so I'll give you 2 of those and 2 of those. For mids, maybe not that guy, maybe this guy. So that's like a Swiss Army knife with only the good stuff. Nothing that you don't need, but all the stuff you really need. And if it's not number 1, it's definitely number 2. It's quick, it's easy, you know, and it's meant for people who don't really want to think too hard about EQing, but it's a lot of those choices that we learned over years. Oh, I don't think I'll use the Pultec here, it's not the right thing. You don't have to think about that. You just know that he's already made that decision for you based on his years of experience. I love the G3 guitar suite. I like to blow people's minds with the Motown bass preset. It's like, you know, you have a guy plug in a precision bass and he plays and he's a great player. And then you say, check this out, and you put the James Jamerson preset on, and suddenly you got a 70s record. It just sounds amazing. Now, another great thing that people sleep on is the stomp boxes. I mean, you have basically a whole music store right there, and as many as you want. You know, oh, I need a chorus and a delay and a compressor and a fuzz and maybe a wah-wah. I've often automated a wah-wah with a little, you know, assign a continuous controller to the wah-wah and just wah, 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 wah. Hey, I'm having fun, guys, leave me alone. But I don't only use them on guitars, I use them on Wurlitzers, on Rhodes, especially those things which would be a traditional way to have a, let's say, a chorus pedal on a Rhodes. Can't beat it. That's Herbie's in the 70s. And, but what about voices? What if you just want an old, dirty, grungy delay on your lead vocal? How about the stomp box? Sounds awesome.